Don Lemon's departure from X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, came with a statement that captured his frustration. He claimed there were no meaningful discussions left to be had. After years of engaging with audiences on social media, he announced his exit, suggesting the online space was too harsh, too judgmental, and too quick to label him without the buffer of producers or a teleprompter. The online world, he argued, strips away the polish of traditional media, exposing individuals to raw, unfiltered criticism. For Lemon, this seemed to be a bitter pill. He implied that the platform's environment was unforgiving, where people might call you out harshly, perhaps even unfairly. Yet, his critics, including prominent figures like Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly, saw his exit not as a noble retreat but as a long-overdue reckoning for a media personality they viewed as out of touch, smug, and emblematic of a fading era of legacy media. Lemon's announcement wasn't met with the sympathy he might have hoped for. Instead, it sparked a wave of reactions, with many seeing it as an attempt to spin his departure into a story of personal evolution rather than a response to mounting criticism. His detractors, particularly Rogan and Kelly, didn't hold back, framing his exit as the inevitable collapse of a carefully curated but ultimately hollow media persona. They argued that Lemon's career, once promising, had devolved into a caricature of itself, marked by arrogance, disconnect, and a reliance on outdated media tactics that no longer resonated with an audience craving authenticity over performance. Rogan, known for his unfiltered podcast style, approached Lemon's downfall with a mix of disbelief and amusement. To him, Lemon represented everything wrong with traditional media, a figure who thrived on manufactured outrage, delivering pre-packaged takes with an air of intellectual superiority that rarely matched the substance of his commentary. Rogan painted a vivid picture of Lemon as someone who didn't just report on cultural storms but actively stirred them, only to step back and feign objectivity. He recalled moments where Lemon's on-air presence felt like a performance, reading from a script with a smirk, as if his every word was profound, when often it was just recycled talking points. Rogan found it baffling that someone so disconnected could hold a primetime slot for as long as Lemon did, likening him to a captain confidently steering a ship into a dock and then acting surprised when it crashed. What struck Rogan most was Lemon's knack for alienating nearly everyone, left, right, and center. This wasn't just a failure of messaging, it was a unique kind of disconnect, a talent for rubbing people the wrong way with a blend of condescension and unearned confidence. Rogan pointed to specific moments, like Lemon Street interviews, where he seemed less interested in listening than in lecturing. In one instance, a man on the street challenged Lemon's reliance on mainstream sources, listing outlets like Axios and The Washington Post, only to dismiss them as untrustworthy. Lemon's response, doubling down on his narrative rather than engaging, felt emblematic of his broader approach. To Rogan, this wasn't journalism, it was a performance, one that assumed the audience was too naive to notice the gaps in logic or the lack of curiosity. Rogan's critique wasn't just about Lemon's style, it was about the broader system that propped him up. He saw Lemon as a product of a media machine that rewarded safe soundbites over genuine inquiry. For years, Lemon had coasted on a polished image, delivering lines that fit neatly into a network's agenda while avoiding the kind of self-reflection that might have kept him relevant. When Lemon was demoted from his primetime solo anchor role to a morning show co-anchor, Rogan saw it as a crack in the facade, a sign that even the media establishment was starting to question his value. The demotion, paired with reports of Lemon clashing with co-hosts like Caitlin Collins over interruptions, painted a picture of a man struggling to adapt to a changing landscape where ego couldn't override teamwork. Megyn Kelly, on the other hand, approached Lemon's downfall with a surgical precision that contrasted with Rogan's raw energy. Where Rogan was the loud guitar riff, Kelly was the steady cello, calm, focused, and unrelenting. She didn't need to raise her voice to dismantle Lemon's legacy, she let the facts do the talking. Kelly framed Lemon as a cautionary tale, a once-respected journalist who traded credibility for viral moments and applause from a narrow audience. She pointed to his career arc as a slow descent from reporting to posturing, where the pursuit of trending hashtags replaced any commitment to truth. To Kelly, Lemon wasn't just a flawed figure. He was a symbol of what happens when media prioritizes image over substance, hiring for identity markers rather than skill or integrity. Kelly's critique zeroed in on Lemon's smugness, which she described as a kind of delusional confidence. She likened him to someone who'd just discovered a TED Talk and suddenly believed they were a philosopher, quoting half-understood ideas with the conviction of a scholar. She recalled moments where Lemon's on-air demeanor, complete with a knowing smirk and dramatic pauses, suggested he was delivering groundbreaking insights, when in reality, he was often just parroting buzzwords or shallow takes. One clip she highlighted involved Lemon dismissing entire groups of people, like those hesitant about vaccines, as stupid or silly, urging society to shame them or leave them behind. To Kelly, this wasn't just a bad take, it was a window into Lemon's disconnect, a belief that he could lecture the audience into agreement rather than engage with their concerns. What made Kelly's takedown particularly sharp was her focus on Lemon's inability to share space. She pointed to his reported clashes with female co-hosts, particularly Collins, as evidence of an ego that couldn't handle equality. Lemon, who'd built his brand as a progressive voice, seemed to unravel when asked to collaborate rather than dominate. Kelly didn't need to embellish, the irony spoke for itself. Here was a man who positioned himself as a moral authority, yet struggled to practice the inclusivity he preached when it came to sharing a set. His discomfort with women who challenged him, like Collins, wasn't just a personal failing, it was a crack in the carefully constructed image of enlightenment he'd spent years cultivating. Both Rogan and Kelly saw Lemon's exit from CNN not as a tragedy but as an inevitable outcome. To Rogan, it was like the media finally cleaning out its closet, tossing out a name tag that had long overstayed its welcome. Kelly, meanwhile, noted the industry's silence. No grand defense, no outcry, just a quiet reshuffling as if Lemon's departure was a minor administrative task. This wasn't the fall of a bold truth-teller, it was the removal of a liability, someone too wrapped up in their own narrative to notice the audience shifting away. Lemon's attempt at a comeback, with a new podcast and bold claims on X about being back, bigger, bolder, freer, only fueled their skepticism. Rogan found it laughable, comparing it to a boy band member trying to go solo after being booted for lip-syncing. The announcement reeked of desperation, a grab for relevance in a world that had already moved on. Kelly, with her trademark restraint, barely acknowledged it, offering little more than a raised eyebrow before returning to her work. To them, Lemon's return wasn't a revival, it was a reminder of his refusal to adapt, like someone trying to start a fire with wet matches in a storm. What made their critiques resonate wasn't just the humor or the sharpness, it was the broader truth they uncovered. Lemon wasn't an anomaly. He was a product of a media system that had long prioritized style over substance, rewarding those who could deliver polished outrage over those who asked hard questions. Rogan saw him as a walking teleprompter, coasting on image while alienating the very audience he claimed to represent. Kelly viewed him as a warning, proof that fame without foundation always crumbles. Together, they painted a picture of a man who'd built his career on surface-level checkmarks, identity, charisma, moral posturing, only to watch it collapse when those checkmarks couldn't sustain him. The irony, as both Rogan and Kelly pointed out, was that Lemon's downfall came not from his usual scapegoats but from the very culture he'd once leveraged. The progressive audience he'd courted turned on him when his actions, whether clashing with co-hosts or dismissing entire groups as stupid, didn't align with the values he preached. Rogan called it poetic, a Shakespearean twist where the hero's own hubris brings him down. Kelly framed it as a simple truth. When you stop listening, you stop mattering. Lemon's silence after the critiques, his lack of a robust defense, only amplified their point. The world had changed, and he hadn't kept up. Rogan's dissection was particularly brutal in its clarity. He didn't just criticize Lemon's takes. He questioned how someone so out of touch could rise so high. He recalled moments like Lemon's infamous claim that a controversial drug was merely veterinary medicine, ignoring its long history of human use. When challenged, Lemon doubled down, framing it as a minor detail rather than a deliberate misrepresentation. To Rogan, this was emblematic of Lemon's approach, confident, dismissive, and utterly uninterested in the nuances that might complicate his narrative. It wasn't just about being wrong, it was about the arrogance of refusing to learn. Kelly, meanwhile, brought a different kind of heat. She didn't just point to Lemon's missteps, she contextualized them as part of a larger pattern. His smugness, his lecturing tone, his inability to connect with anyone who didn't already agree with him, these weren't isolated incidents but symptoms of a deeper flaw. She recalled his comments about Nikki Haley's age, where he suggested women were past their prime after their 40s, a remark that sparked backlash not for its content but for its casual sexism and tone-deaf delivery. Kelly didn't need to pile on, she simply let the clip play, letting Lemon's own words expose his disconnect. What united Rogan and Kelly wasn't just their disdain for Lemon but their belief that he represented a dying breed of media figure. The rise of podcasts, independent voices, and platforms like X had shifted the landscape, rewarding authenticity over polish, conversation over monologue. Lemon, with his reliance on scripted outrage and moral superiority, couldn't adapt. Rogan saw him as a relic, a man still trying to steer the narrative when audiences now demanded a seat at the table. Kelly viewed him as a cautionary tale, a reminder that credibility comes from substance, not screen time. Their takedown wasn't just about Lemon's fall, it was about what it signified. The audience had evolved, grown sharper, less tolerant of empty rhetoric. They didn't want lectures, they wanted dialogue. Lemon, for all his primetime charm, never grasped that. He kept talking at people, never with them, assuming his platform gave him authority rather than earning it through insight or empathy. Rogan and Kelly didn't just expose his flaws, they held up a mirror to an entire era of media that had lost its way, where volume trumped value and performance overshadowed honesty. As Lemon tries to claw his way back, posting on X and teasing new projects, the response from Rogan and Kelly is telling. Rogan laughs it off, moving on to the next topic with the ease of someone who knows the story's already over. Kelly, with her calm focus, barely acknowledges it, letting the silence speak for itself. To them, Lemon isn't the main event. He's a footnote, a fleeting example of what happens when you mistake being seen for being needed. His legacy isn't a scandal or a triumph. It's static, the kind of noise an audience now tunes out with ease. The world didn't stop when he left, and it won't pause for his return. The channel has changed, and Lemon's voice, once so loud, now fades into the background, drowned out by a world that's moved on to fresher, more honest conversations.